Well, after this afternoon.
Okay, I got you. Oh, you're listening? Oh, yeah. Is that your house? The house? That's, what is that, on 11th Street? Okay. That's the last one. The only thing I have on the agenda today over there is the house. Oh, you own a certain distance. This case is the demolition of referring to 11th Street, so you own property within a certain distance. That's why you got the notice. Yeah, and so what they're gonna be talking today about is tearing down this house. And that's it? Nothing about the property? No, but you got this notice because you're within 150 feet of that. So, but you can hear what they have to say. And there's gonna be a presentation on the park. Just off the agenda, you know, they're putting that piece of the park, South Park. And whereabouts is that? That's gonna be, from, Robinson over toward you. Coming off the walk? No, coming off Robinson. Coming off of Robinson. It's gonna be a walk line and go all the way from Fort down to the river. And the only thing that's cut out is that parking area for two seconds. Any place because the one that I forgot who the one that wanted for that, so that got cut out. No, not his piece. Where the trucks kind of park and then people directly across from the place that he owns, that's when that was parked out. But they're gonna be doing a presentation first, so you can see that. Okay. My name's Laura. No, that's the attorney. I'm Laura. No, not Laura. Sorry. That was my name for a while. No, I'm Laura. I'm the planning with this issue. Morning, Tim. Okay. Sorry, hold on. Oh, you were calling?
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the January meeting of the Riverfront Design Committee. We'll start the meeting off with roll call.
John Joyce,
Here.
Scott Howard, Michelle Dean, Jonathan Heisel, Don Kasperite, Barbara Larson,
Here.
John Postick,
Here.
Dana Templeton,
Here.
and Mike Voorhees.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Great. Okay, the next, in your packet, you should have received minutes from our September 7th meeting. Does anybody have any additions or corrections for the minutes? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Did you get that, Paula? Who's?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item number 3, cases withdrawn. There are none. Item number 4, continuance requests. There are none. And before we get to the rest of our docket, we're going to kind of move ahead to item number 8, communications. And I think Lisa was going to introduce our speaker.
Yes, so all the rest of the cases on the docket involve demolitions necessary for the construction of the MAPS 3 lower park. So this presentation will tell the committee about the vision and design for the lower park. This is, I don't believe we've taken it to, we've presented this to the committee before. It's just recently been ready for presentation. So Brent Waugh is a landscape architect here in Oklahoma City with his own practice, but he's also the representative for Hargreaves, who is the consultant, the landscape consultant for the park. He's going to present it and answer any questions. And again, so this is just an informational presentation so that the committee understands the plans for the park, specifically as it relates to the demolition applications that we'll hear later.
Take it away.
Action. Good morning, everyone. As Lisa said, my name is Brent Waugh, a landscape architect here in Oklahoma City, representing Hargreaves Associates today. We have done this presentation for this body. It was over a year ago, so there's a lot of new faces here. Tori Bootser was with me last time. She was really walking through a lot of the buildings as they were being developed, but just me today. She's a lot better looking than I am. So this, what you're going to see is part of the preliminary design report that's sort of in a draft version right now that's been submitted to the city, is still undergoing revision. This was presented to the MAPS 3 Park Subcommittee, I think December 20th, somewhere right before Christmas, so they could look at it. So it's making the rounds now, so a lot of eyes are getting on it, and the design team is accepting feedback and just making sure that everything is in place as they move forward into their final preliminary design report. So to orient you, you can see the myriad botanical gardens at the north, the upper park, which is well under construction right now, on track for a spring of 2019 completion and opening. And then I-40, Skydance Bridge, the lower park, and then the Riverfront park that has not actually been funded or designed, and then the Oklahoma River. So the lower park is meant to be this connector from the upper park to the river, and it's really meant to have a different character, as the upper park is programmed to hold large events, to be the really big civic park. The lower park starts to transition into a much more naturalistic, almost neighborhood park for the community approaching the river. So I kind of think of it as sort of a gradient north to south, where if you have the myriad is the most intensely cultivated and the most horticultural activity into the upper park. The north part of the upper park is very horticulturally intense, and then as you move south across the highway and down to the river, it just sort of gradiates into this very natural wooded park that responds more to the river and to the community. So at a glance, the lower park is 28 acres, 8 unique areas, right now about a $20 million budget. You all have this in your packet, so you can read through all the verbiage. I'll kind of move quickly and hit the high points.
They don't have it in their
Oh,
packet.
they don't have it. Okay. Well, why not? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so I won't read anything, but I definitely want to hit the high points. As I said, the lower park is a little bit different in terms of it. As it approaches the river, the ecosystem really kind of changes. The topography changes. We're going from a little bit higher elevation, literally down to the river. So those things all affect the way plants grow. The soils are a little bit different. There's a little bit more moisture in the soil. It just creates a little bit of a different environment, where the upper park is really a clean slate. We're starting from nothing and really building soils up there. As we move down to the lower park, we're retaining a lot of the trees that are there, trying to protect a lot of the soils that are there, and really moving into different plant communities that are more responsive to those lower conditions, a little bit wetter conditions. And here's a plan view of just the lower park. So working from north to south, the area up along I-40 is a little bit more activated. It's sort of on that gradient again. As you come across the Skydance Bridge, you'll come down, and then You have the Prairie Garden on the east, and then to the west you'll have an activated sports area there. That area will have one artificial turf playing field, so it'll be green year-round, very durable and tough. You'll have the sports pavilion, which will have bathrooms, offices, storage for sports equipment there. Then you have courts there just along the north side of 10th Street that'll be tennis, basketball, volleyball. We're calling that sort of a flexible sports space right now, but hard surface and different things you can do there. As you move down from the Skydance Bridge, you have a pretty major gradient change. You're trying to get from that elevated highway down into the park. So that area east of the bridge and the promenade coming down the Prairie Garden is about 3 acres of basically wildflower. It's not a useless area, but it's a very challenging area in terms of programming because it just sort of has, it's on the side there. In order to meet our ADA requirements, we have to come down very gradually. But I still think that's a really nice opportunity to have a native garden in that area. So moving down, if you come down the bridge to the west, you would be able to go to the sports area or proceed straight into the woodland lawn, which is very natural in appearance. That we've been down there, we've looked at all the trees that are in place right now. We've tied ribbon around all the trees we want to try to save, and there's some really interesting trees down there. They're not beautiful specimen trees, but they have a lot of character of their own. There's some older trees down there that we want to keep. The promenade is really the key here, and it's the key to the upper park. It's the spine of both parks. So as you're moving down, you come across the highway, you're on the promenade, and everything sort of unfolds off of that piece of the park. And it's about a mile long, so it's a really long walk there. So moving down off the promenade, you'll come through the woodland, then you move into the hollow, and that is topographically the lowest point of the park. So it naturally is going to collect rainwater. It's going to stay a little bit wetter, so that area will have rain gardens, a little bit more of a plant community that's going to take those wet conditions and we're going to try to clean as much of the water as we can before it gets into the stormwater system and eventually into the river. Moving south from there, you get into the community garden. Here you have another pavilion which will have a bathroom and storage and offices potentially. The community garden is really sort of this urban farm, a place where you can grow food, teach kids how to get their hands in the soil. You'll have a kitchen there so you can actually make food that you harvest right there on site. So it's a really neat concept to me, especially in this lower area where you're going to have more communities and neighborhoods and kids that can come and work in these gardens, which is pretty exciting. And then moving down, the last sort of moment on that promenade will be the crescent lawn. So in the upper park, we have the large oval that's meant to handle really large events. This is sort of its little baby brother down here on the end. It's an elevated mound just pretty close to the form of the upper park. You've probably seen the mound already up out of the ground. And the reason why that's sort of lifted like that is so it gets you up and you can now see the water from this crescent lawn, because the river levee is up, and when you're on the ground you really can't see the water. So this is an opportunity to get you up and look out over that levee and see the river. And if you have any questions at any time, feel free just to jump in.
Can I interject one question?
Yes, sir.
What, can we go back one slide? What is that notch out between 11th and 12th and Harvey and Robinson?
That is the land that's owned by Cusack Meat. The city has not yet acquired that piece of property, and therefore we really can't do anything with it right now. So it's just kind of shown as a white out right there. We have some really nice, cool renderings here. I'll kind of work my way through them. Here's that prairie garden looking to the west from Robinson, and the Skydance Bridge in the background. Up there in the red dashed area, that is the scale of the prairie garden. Really meant to be a butterfly, bird attractor, pollinator type garden, which are really becoming increasingly popular, but also increasingly needed in urban areas. Here's an image of the promenade looking to the south. Moving along, you can see all the sort of intended action there, roller skating, bike riding, walking. And here's that 1.3 miles that goes all the way across. We've already seen the pavers for this up at the upper park mocked up, and we have all the trees for the upper park. So we're starting to see elements of both parks coming together, which is pretty neat for the design team to start to see the materials coming together. The Robinson Edge, that Robinson Edge is really important, and I know you all will be making some decisions today based upon a lot along this edge. Not only will it be a conveyor, you can walk on the promenade, but it's intended to make this Robinson Edge much like the Project 180 streetscapes downtown. It's really a continuation of that materials palette and the repetition of the trees along there. And parking is really a huge deal for the park. Some of the MAPS 3 commissioners have been a little concerned about parking, but given all of the street parking along the edge, there is a lot of parking down there. It's just not what we're typically used to around here. It's not surface parking. It's true urban street parking. So Robinson really fulfills that role in the park majorly in terms of setting an edge, providing parking, providing circulation. And additionally, as we look at this, it'll be programmed to be pretty loose. It'll have lawn areas. During events, food trucks will set up there, and you will come up to the curb edge and grab food, and then use these lawn areas for sitting, picnicking, those kinds of things. So it's that little sort of sliver between the promenade and the street really plays a really crucial role in how the park is going to function. This connections over to 14th Street, 11th Street at the top. And another way you can look at this park too is that, at these major streets there are crossing points. Okay, so at 14th Street there's a major sidewalk that comes across. At 12th, a major one comes across, and 11th. So we're trying to create this urban connectivity across the park. It's almost a continuation of the street grid, but with walkways through the park. And so that Robinson Edge helps reinforce that. It helps open it up and create this sort of permeability walking through the park. Here's a view of the artificial turf sports area, looking back to the east here with the sports pavilion, and then a little bit of an inset of what the pavilion will look like with picnic tables, open air down there. Again, in the red dashed area here, we have the sports area. And I think this is kind of clever because that area along Walker, as you go on Walker and you look down, there's quite a bit of a slope there. So the park is really downgrade. And so what they're doing there is using that slope almost as a place to sit on a hill and kind of look out over the sports area, which is really pretty neat. Here's an image of that woodland, again, preserving as many trees as we possibly can, open lawn, just really flexible, passive park space down there. An image of the hollow, so the circular areas you see are rain gardens, which we're constructing in the upper park as well. And so they will capture and hold rainwater, and then the plants in there will slowly absorb them and clean the water before they enter into the storm system. Again, you can start to see those are almost like little blocks in there where they're kind of sandwiched in between these major streets. The community garden, looking at the community garden pavilion back there in the back, in the block, that's sort of sandwiched in between those 13th and 14th Street there. And here's that crescent lawn. You're up on top of that hill looking out over the levee, and you can see the river and then see performances going on stage. I really think this is going to be a pretty special spot down there, and just that connection to the river is going to be great. You can see all sorts of community festivals and events happening down there that'll be really, really, really nice. It's about 3 acres, seating for about close to 600 people in the Oval, so it's a pretty substantial event center. I went through that pretty quickly. I know you have a long agenda today, but I'm open to any questions you have. We can answer them for you.
Brent, do you have any idea when this will come in for the approvals?
I think since it was presented to the subcommittee in middle of December, there weren't really any major changes. There's a question about whether or not there needs to be a nature play area added into the lower park. There's a group that would like to have that happen. I get the sense that that's probably likely to happen, so there's a little bit more design that's going to have to be interjected into the lower park. I know the design team is very eager to get it completed and get it through council so they can start work on the construction plans. So I would say probably within the next 60 to 90 days, this should be completed and presented to council. I know there's a desire to, not to push it through, but to, now that we're under construction on the upper park, in order to sort of keep that machine going in terms of procurement of trees and things like that, we'd really like to keep it going.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
It has to do with the trees. I drove down this last weekend and saw the trees that had ribbons around them, taped off or whatever. How many are there? How many do you know how many you're saving?
I don't know. One of the things that since we haven't gotten this design review approved by council, they haven't approved the funds to do all the surveying of the site. There was a little bit of preliminary survey done up on the extreme north end, but we haven't had a survey of every tree, so we really don't know right now. I would probably take a guess that there's probably maybe 200 trees that we're going to be able to save. An arborist has gone through the site and looked at it and given recommendations. He did not recommend saving very many, but I think that was based more upon looking for trees that were more specimen-like and fit the mold of, sort of beautiful park-like tree. I think the design team's a lot more interested in saving as many trees as possible. And there's a really nice sort of species diversity down there. I found some Kentucky coffee trees growing down there, sort of wild, which was really exciting for me because those are truly native trees that can be, I started thinking about taking seed from them and trying to propagate and things like that. So there's some really nice elms down there. There's some a couple of oaks that are pretty nice. A lot of pecans actually down there. And that's exactly where you would expect to find a pecan. It's sort of in that low bottom area. So I know there's a big desire to save a lot. I don't know how many there are right now.
They do have a lot of character, the ones I was referring to, but they are in need of help. Some of them are just...
Yeah. A lot of it's just clearing out a lot of the other stuff around them. There's a lot of old fences down there, and if you know, fence rows tend to sort of have a lot of volunteers in them. So if we can get things sort of cleared out, and during the sort of demolition process and there's all sorts of things. There's boats down there. There's all sorts of things in that area. So just getting it cleared out and protecting the trees we want to save during that process will be really key. But I think we're going to come out with quite a few trees that are salvageable.
I got a question, I guess, for you, Lisa, in terms of, is this talk about trees, is that within our purview? Because when I read the item for consideration, it says demolish accessory building signs, fences, all site improvements. Trees fall into that at all?
Yes, typically for the park, for the upper park, there was a specific landscape plan submitted with a tree schedule and a pretty detailed demolition plan. So you guys will see that.
Well, what if they demolish everything before we ever see it?
They shouldn't, and there's really no expectation that they would, because the committee has to approve it before they get their permits. I don't believe there's been any preliminary site clearing of any sort.
I would probably defer to Tim on that.
We have one
Could you, microphone, please?
I'm Tim Jones with the MAPS office, project manager, and we have one demo project going on, and it's to remove some dilapidated houses that's in that area. And in that area, we have those trees that he specified that's been marked, so those trees will be saved. And so we are considering the trees, and the reason why some of the trees hadn't been spec'd out because of we hadn't acquired the property yet, and so, yeah, they were not able to go on that property and actually identify those trees that we are trying to save. So we are looking to save the trees in those areas that need to be saved, that can be saved.
And just to clarify, staff has actually issued 9 demo permits administratively in this area for the buildings where the park is going that were not shown to be contributing to the proposed Hubcap Alley Historic District. So some of those other buildings out there have already been authorized for demo, but I think what we're hearing today is, even though typically my permits say buildings and all site improvements, if the design team has already marked trees and said we're trying to save these, I would imagine they're going to go around those trees.
Yes.
Does anybody have any questions for Tim?
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm kind of just, rather than kind of be so formal as to talk in depth about each one of these items individually, I'm kind of thinking anybody has any questions about any of these items, let's go ahead and bring them up now. And kind of in that vein, I'm wondering, does anybody in the audience have any comments or anything for us before we start running through these items? No? Okay. Is that okay, Lisa? Well, I don't.
Yeah, we need to call the item and then ask people.
Okay, you be sure and wave your hands when we get to your item then. Okay. All right, well, let's go back to our agenda then. And so on the, well, let's just say, does anybody have, we can talk about the item on the consent docket if anybody has a question or comment about that. Any comments or questions about number 5 on the consent docket? Okay, I'm going to say that's a no. So
I would motion to approve the consent docket.
that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Second.
Got the Paula's shaking her head. That's great. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the individual cases. We have to vote on the consent docket, of course. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the consent docket is approved. Okay, now under cases for individual consideration, the first one is SRCA 17-00012 at 1319 South Robinson. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that item? If not,
This is the Massey's building.
Right.
Some of these it's easier for us to realize which one they are with a name, and that has been there for quite some time. And Tim is here from the MAPS office who can answer any questions. Staff had included in the staff report the fact that the Phase 4 of the intensive level survey of downtown showed the possibility of establishing a historic district down here for Hubcap Alley, and this is one of the contributing structures that was shown. We included in the staff report those items from the demolition guidelines we felt were appropriate to look at, realizing that, as you saw from a previous presentation, this is being programmed for the lower park. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer it, but I think we included quite a bit of information about this building and about the surrounding area, including the survey forms that were done for these buildings.
does anyone have any questions for Laura? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, let's go ahead and vote on that. So we have a motion to approve item A. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, that passes. Okay, so next Item B is SRCA 17-00014 at 1107 and 1113 South Robinson.
This is kind of the north end of the Hubcap Alley area. As you can see, they're currently painted black. They kind of blend in. The staff report looks almost identical to the one that you just saw for the previous case, other than the particulars about this site. They were considered contributing to a potential historic district in Phase 4 of the intensive level survey.
Okay. Looking out in the audience, any comments about this one? No?
I have a question. You know, it's listed here as Phase 4 for proposed Hubcap Alley Historic District. And we're demolishing everything on the west side of Robinson. Does that mean that a potential historic district is not even under consideration anymore?
What I would say is that Phase 4 came out, and I believe it was 2012. I'm trying to get to that survey form. At that time in Phase 4, this particular sheet actually shows two potential districts, that there's been no move on either the part of the city or private individuals, because this happens to include the Little Flower area up in the upper left corner. So if all of these buildings were demolished, and you could see in yellow the ones on the left side that you're looking at today, that would still leave everything that's on the east side. I would say that if somebody wanted to establish the district, they could come in and actually modify the boundaries, have it go over to Robinson, because there's still a significant number of buildings shown as contributing on the east side of Robinson. That right now, a lot of them are sitting there boarded up that aren't being used. So there's still the potential for a district if someone decides that they want to go forward with that recommendation.
Well, my only objection or my only concern is that by demolishing all of the buildings on the west side, and I know it's for a good cause, it's for the park, but by demolishing those, you reduce the ability to create a historic district character. I don't think that you could get the full effect of a district by only having one side of the street represented.
I would add that all the buildings on the east side would still be potentially eligible for National Register nomination, individual or group, and that could make them eligible for tax credits and really help facilitate their redevelopment, even if the whole thing is not a, quote, district. Individually, they could still be renovated and maintained.
So the potential for a historic district has been removed.
No, I agree with Laura. I think somebody could still make the case that it's still a district. I don't believe there's a definition of district. It's a group, it's an area. Out of the surveys, there were 20 different districts across downtown. I mean, that's just a random, there were a lot of different districts, mainly focused on, with varying boundaries, just, with the intent of highlighting their development potential and their importance. But individually, everything remains eligible. I mean, I guess part of what I'm trying to say is just because it's a historic district doesn't mean it's protected in any way necessarily, depending on the zoning.
No, I understand that.
The other thing I would point out is there were 26 buildings in that area. Total 21 were considered contributing and 5 were non-contributing. So if you look at the map, you've got 2 red X's that are shown on the west side. Those are 2 administrative approvals I've issued. Those would be 2 non-contributing ones that got eliminated from those. The ones in yellow, those obviously were contributing, so you would still meet the percentage that you have to have of contributing versus non-contributing to be able to establish the district if someone decided to do that at some point. Because the majority of the buildings on the east side are contributing. There are a few that are non-contributing.
It's my opinion that if, for example, Automobile Alley, one whole side was demolished for whatever reason, it wouldn't have the impact or the character that is required for it to be called Automobile Alley. Same thing with Bricktown. And so I think that if we don't make an effort to at least save the facade of these buildings or try to incorporate them, we negate having the ability in the future to call it a historic district or hubcap alley or however you want to, present it. But that's my main objection for these buildings.
Like Dana, I drove down South Robinson a couple days ago, and Hubcap Alley is a very cute sounding name and everything, and you can kind of in your mind sort of envision this really quaint area or something, but at some point that there has to be some kind of form to sort of back that up, and there are a couple buildings on the east side of the street, several, that I think would kind of rise to that standard, but on the west side, using my most active imagination, I almost couldn't see it. So, anybody else have any other comments?
I'll just interject about the early on in the park design process, and maybe Brent and Mapp's office have some more info on this. There was initial discussion on should these be kept, what would they be used for, could they be used for park amenities, all these things. But I remember a key tenet of both parks was you needed visual transparency through the park, that from a safety aspect, buildings on Robinson blocking views into the park was a significant user, just an invitation and a safety concern. So that was what I remember as the reason early on, also because of their current condition and integrity, that early on they weren't considered for reuse.
Okay, if there's no more discussion, I'll go ahead and call for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Do a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Next is that is approved. Item C, SRCA 17-00015 at 1201, 1207, and 1209 South Robinson Avenue.
This is, I guess people refer to this as the Johnny's Hubcap building. It's currently vacant. Staff report contained similar information as to the last ones. And this is, obviously there's 3 buildings built at different times. Same information about condition of the buildings you saw on the proposed park plan. This was an area, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, where the promenade was actually starting to swing and get closer to Robinson.
Any comments from the audience on this one? No? Okay. Any further discussion from the committee? I'll go ahead and entertain a motion then on this item.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, that is also approved. We'll move on to item D, SRCA 17-00026 at 331 Southwest 11th Street.
This is not part of the park. This is actually was not submitted by MAPS. This was submitted by Okura, and they are here in the audience. In Phase 4, this structure, and I was actually surprised, but it was shown as being individually eligible due to the architecture and the history of the area. If you veered off from looking at the park, you will see there's a lot of holes in this area where over time buildings have been torn down, and this is just east of, and let me get there, because there's other houses on the street, but it's just east of Walker and the building that most people identify within that area, the old school building that's used. And staff included the same information on this one, like in the last ones, as far as the condition of it. Staff kind of disagreed with the survey form that was done in 2012 where they said it was in good condition. I would argue that in 2012, I don't think it was still in good condition when I look at the older pictures of it. But it has had a lack of maintenance over time, which makes things a little difficult to even figure out if it would have be financially viable to actually put money into it and keep the structure. Okura has indicated that they have acquired this and they don't have plans yet. There were 2 other applications for houses further east of this that they've acquired that I issued administrative approvals for demolition because they were not shown as being individually eligible for the National Register. So at some point when they have plans for redevelopment, you will obviously see that if it meets your criteria for requiring your review. And Okura is here if you have any questions for Cassie.
Yeah, I guess I have some questions. So, you know, without there being plans right now to put something on that site, you know, what's wrong with just kind of leaving it as is?
Yeah. Cassie Poor, 105 North Hudson, representing Okura. Urban Renewal Authority has acquired several properties on the site in this block, with this block kind of being a key area right along the parcel. We have high hopes for great development right there. So we have slowly started to acquire several properties. We had already had one under ownership, and so the goal is to issue eventually an RFP for this block for high quality development right there on that key block where the park is. So we don't have development in mind yet, but just to prevent any sort of further deterioration or vandalism down there, we would like to demolish the home.
So I'm just curious, do you guys ever, in such a case, you know, kind of rent a property for a certain length of time until, or are you kind of like?
We don't.
Okay. Well, what would you, Laura, say about, I mean, is it in any kind of condition to where it could be?
I have not been inside it, and I am not a certified home inspector of any way, shape, or form. But as a longtime renter,
Yeah.
speaking as a longtime renter, that it would appear to me that you would need to put some money in it to be able to get the type of renter that you would want to have in that area. But they didn't provide any of that documentation, so I don't really know how viable that is to do that. But you can see on the map the 2 X's on this block. Those are the other 2 houses that they applied for demo that I've approved administratively because they were shown as non-contributing, not eligible at all. So you can also see how all of the north of here, there's a lot of vacant lots that don't have structures on it. They probably did at one point, but they've been demolished over the years. So there's a lot of vacant property out there.
Well, and as the vacant property goes away, I think you could argue that the area just gets worse and worse and worse. And so, you know, I mean, I know that your organization has a spectacular track record. I just kind of worry a little bit about the precedent that we set when we, you know, people come up and say, yeah, we want to tear down this structure. We don't have any plans for it, but we're going to do something really cool in the future. I mean, in your case, I believe you, but...
Cassie, do you have a kind of a timeline on when you think you would have everything assembled and go out for that RFP?
Yeah, we're hoping to finish acquisition probably in the next, hopefully 6 months, and then we'll issue an RFP as soon as possible and see what kind of proposals we get for redevelopment.
I have a question. Do you know what that area is zoned? Is it residential? Is that your development or?
Currently, that property in there is zoned DTD2, although it is in Scenic River. It happens to have a downtown zoning district zoning. So that allows everything from single-family all the way up the gambit, just like other areas in it's a fringe downtown zoning. So, and if the other thing to point out, and you look on the map, is here's the boundary for the park. Then over here, immediately adjacent on the west side of this house to be demoed, is the proposed boundary for this Little Flower Riverside School Historic District, which has the Catholic Church in the middle of it, as well as the old Riverside School right here. So there's all kinds of, it could go either way, there's all kinds of stuff, but we still have not had anybody come to us to try to establish that historic district either.
So the D2, is there a limitation on height building with that?
No. There's a
So
minimum.
they could build a 50-story?
There's a minimum height of 2 stories. There's no maximum height, and there's a maximum setback of 10 feet from the front property line. So that is, it's definitely a different type of development than you've seen out there, because it's still a downtown zoning district.
And the downtown development framework covers this as well, right?
Yes,
and
it
so
does.
we pay a lot of attention to what the recommendations are of the framework.
Right, the framework and the code envision a substantially more dense form and use than single family, although single family is allowed.
How long have you owned this property?
We just recently acquired it.
Okay, any more discussion or questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion. No, we already decided that no one in the audience besides Casey, anything. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to accept.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to item number 7. We are being asked to, well, rather than read this, Lisa, why don't you just kind of give us the snapshot, or Laura, either one.
Sure. This is what is called the, quote, Airbnb ordinance. It provides, it would allow home sharing, which Airbnb, et cetera, in, it would make it a conditional use in all zoning districts that permit single-family residential. So right now, there are no provisions for how Airbnb works in the city. And a lot of people in a lot of different areas, for a lot of very good reasons, want to see some regulation. So this would set conditions of use. Those conditions are, Laura, do you know them off the top of your head?
Yeah.
It has to do with the
So
time.
not very many.
Okay, they can have 30
Oh, actually, they're up on
consecutive
the screen.
days. Okay, yeah, 30 consecutive days per guest. You can't go over 5 or more bedrooms as being rented. If you do, then you have to come up to building code. Must get a home sharing license. The license is tracking as a separate ordinance that would establish the fees and what you have to submit for the license, and that you are actually paying your fees and taxes. So this affects Scenic River in that, so Scenic River is an overlay, and within that overlay are various base zonings. We just talked about, like DTD2 is one of the base zonings, but there are also various residential base zones. There's actually quite a lot.
Yeah, Scenic River is the largest design district, if you've ever looked at a map, and so it runs the gambit of most of the R districts, so this would impact those, as well as the DTD2, and we have some DBD in Scenic River. So
It shouldn't affect anything physically, because single family is already specifically exempt from having to follow the RDC rules and regulations.
Unless it's in DBD or DTD2.
Unless its base zoning is DTD2.
Okay, so if we were to recommend approval of this or give our recommendation, whatever, this, I mean, is this for, we're just thinking of this with respect to our district?
Yes.
Not necessarily some other district?
Correct.
On the north side of town or wherever else, this is just for here? And then
correct.
these other committees are like, say, the
Yes.
HP?
Yeah, HP heard it yesterday, for example.
How did that go?
HP recommended that there be more public outreach to the historic neighborhoods because, and they included in their motion that, in their opinion, the HP areas are probably most affected because they are probably the most desirable for people looking for cool Airbnbs and walking distance to nice amenities. So they believe they will be significantly impacted. So they made a recommendation to the Planning Commission that a lot more outreach to the neighborhoods be done. Bricktown, in contrast, Bricktown Committee was extremely excited because they saw, they're like, well, everybody should be renting an Airbnb, should be, some office or, apartment. I couldn't, back of a restaurant, I don't know, I couldn't quite visualize where, but they were extremely excited and thought it was extremely appropriate and useful to Bricktown.
My only question was with regard to the condition that says the owner/host must obtain a home sharing license. What is involved in that?
So there's another ordinance that's going to be working its way through. And it won't be going to Planning Commission since it's not a zoning ordinance. But it would require just the payment of a fee. They need to sign some affidavits saying that their house complies with certain safety requirements. And that you also can't be renting out in an area that's not approved for residential occupancy. So you can't have somebody in a tent or something in your backyard and rent that out as Airbnb.
Is there a cost for the license?
I believe it's $24.
Will we get an opportunity to see that ordinance? Does it come back to the...
No, since that's not a zoning ordinance, it's a business license ordinance, it won't be going through the same process.
Okay,
So it'll be
goes
going to
straight-
City Council.
Straight to council?
Right.
Okay. Do you have any idea when?
No, I don't, actually. I think it'll probably be sort of dependent on the progress of the zoning ordinance.
I'd like to clarify, this is not for rental property, does it? It says that it needs to be the owner's main residence. So someone can't purchase the house as a rental property and Airbnb it out.
So the way that this use unit was drafted was so that it wouldn't capture people who buy a rental house and have a tenant there for a year. That's a whole separate issue. But I mean, theoretically, this is just a single-family dwelling, and you can't rent to the same person for more than 30 days and have that qualify as home sharing. So I don't know that there is an owner occupancy requirement.
I thought I read that, and I wanted clarification.
But just to summarize to John's comment, yes, so Riverfront is being asked to weigh in on how this ordinance would affect the Riverfront district.
My first time this came up on my radar is like I was president of the Crown Heights Homeowners Association 6 years ago, and so that means I constantly still get phone calls from people that, can't remember who the current president is or whatever, and somebody was complaining about somebody was doing an Airbnb next door, and so I know that there's this, concern from some people, but at the same time, I never really kind of got to the root of what the concern was. When you really tried to, it was like there wasn't any specific incident that had ever happened, and then it was like, well, you could have this problem person. I was like, well, you could have this problem neighbor. At least this one's going to be gone in 30 days. So yeah, I kind of have a hard time understanding. Okay, but at that point, I guess we'll go ahead and entertain a motion, unless someone has something else to talk about.
Motion to approve.
Okay.
It's to provide a recommendation of approval.
Yes, I motion to approve this recommendation of approving.
I agree with John. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for giving me those words.
Okay, item B, election of officers. We need to elect a, seems like we just did this. Was that because somebody was coming off, or?
Yeah, I don't remember. It wasn't too long ago, but it is.
We're supposed to do it in November, but we didn't have a meeting. So,
What's that?
We're supposed to do it annually in November, but you
So we
guys
did it-
haven't
we did
met
it like in
since
October?
September.
In
Yeah,
September,
you guys
okay.
haven't met since September.
All right. Okay, so do we have any nominations for a chair?
I would nominate John Joyce.
Is that okay? Am I handling that right?
Second.
Okay, any other nominations? Okay, if not, we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? All right. Okay, now we need to talk about the vice chair. And currently, our vice chair is Scott, right? I don't know whether am I allowed to nominate somebody?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll nominate Scott. Do we have any other nominations?
I'll second Scott.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, great. Let's see, we've already talked about our communication. Laura, you got anything else to say about all the demolition that you've already approved?
no, just we're busy this month.
Oh, I guess.
Currently, we don't have, I'm not anticipating a meeting next month at the present time. So I
Okay.
thought we were on a roll. I would be cool to have 2 meetings consecutive, but I don't think so.
Okay, any other comments from planning staff?
Just a reminder of our annual committee commissioner training on Friday, January 26th. Oh, well, we'll celebrate.
Say that again, Lisa.
I can't think of a better way to celebrate.
Lisa, have we received any information on that?
I think everybody got a save the date on their email calendar.
Okay, tell me the date again.
Maybe I did.
Friday, January 26th. You can also mark it as Dana's birthday. And it's going to be at the Central Maintenance Facility, which is out on Southwest 15th in Portland. You will be receiving confirmation here in the next week with more details about the agenda. We're going to do it similar to last year in that we'll have breakfast and gather between 7:30 and starting at 7:30 so that 8 a.m. everyone can be in their chairs ready for the material, and we'll go through lunch and adjourn hopefully at 1. And we'll send out in your confirmation with directions and everything. We'll also ask for everyone's meal preferences.
Do you give PDHs for this?
Yeah, I do need to. You can self-report. Yeah, we do need to offer continuing ed for sure.
Okay, so the next meeting, we're not too sure. We don't think we're meeting in January. Okay. Okay, all right, so, I'm sorry, any comments from committee members? All right, then I declare us adjourned.